That would have been way cooler, dude. Instead of like befriending the guy buying the fucking cucumber and having him tell me about his Saturday afternoon of going home and watching the new Top Gun.
Well, I have to say, like, I either want to see dragons doing Top Gun shit now, or possibly even Tom Cruise on a dragon. I don't know where they're taking the Mission Impossible franchise. Well, actually, the impossible thing would be Tom Cruise wants to do all the stunts himself. So they'd probably actually have to create a physical dragon for him to be willing to do it. But then he would actually try, give dude credit. I think he would try to ride a dragon for real, for real. Like none of that digital bullshit. Real dragon for Tom or nothing.
Yeah, I mean, right after he jumps on the couch, dude, up and down, up and down.
That's his saddle. He's got a couch on top of the dragon. He doesn't have a saddle. He's got Oprah's couch.
He's got Oprah's couch, dude.
I drink and I know things. That's what I do.
Welcome to Drunk on Dragons. Cheers to you. This is where we break down House of the Dragon. I'm one of your hosts, Jamie G, and I'm here with my co-host, Magnum Mills, and we're going to talk about the Heirs of the Dragon.
And thank you for joining us. I am Magnum Mills. You can find the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the good ones. Just search for Drunk on Dragons. Find our YouTube channel at JoBloFootballShow.com. You could please like, subscribe, follow, all that good stuff. Find us on social media at Drunk on Dragons. We're here, dude. It finally happened, right? Like the Game of Thrones spinoff, it aired. It was one of those things, right? It was like what is Dr. Dre's Detox? Like it felt for a minute like it was always going to be teased. Oh, that's the Wind of Winter. I'm sorry, I'm talking about the Winds of Winter.
Yeah, it's right up there with Detox. Please be aware that Drunk on Dragons, this here podcast, we are a full spoiler show. All episodes of House of Dragon, Game of Thrones, and basically all of George R.R. Martin's original works are fair game for discussion for us on this here podcast titled Drunk on Dragons. Cheers to you. The only thing we will not discuss are any leaks or screeners. This is your first and your final warning.
And we're not going to go out of our way to like give you knowledge from Fire and Blood or whatever, but it could come up. The previous Game of Thrones episodes most definitely will come up. I guess there's a few people out there who are watching this without having seen Thrones first. I think that could be an interesting experience. So if you're one of those people, let us know. And this was, like Jamie G said, the Heirs of the Dragon series premiere of House of the Dragon, episode 1, season 1, aired Sunday, March 21st, 2022. Was directed by Mikhail Shapochnik, Game of Thrones veteran. He's the show co-runner here, and written by Ryan Condal, again, Game of Thrones veteran, show co-runner here. Short plot synopsis is Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen tries to find her place within the court of King Viserys I.
Okay, before we get into the specifics, we should probably each give our initial thoughts on the Heirs of the Dragon. Mills, how'd you feel about the series premiere of House of the Dragon?
Pretty good. I was definitely a little bit cautiously optimistic, I would say. I was cautiously optimistic. I really enjoyed Game of Thrones for the most part. As a guy who also read the books, I could kind of understand the ending of Game of Thrones, but the way they arrived at it, it left me with a bad taste in my mouth to the point I hadn't rewatched Thrones until very, very recently. Hadn't reread the books in a long time, other than reading Fire and Blood, reading some of the other ancillary materials that George has put out. I was happy with it. I definitely didn't quite have the hook of the Thrones pilot at the end with, Bran getting tossed out the window. I think it's hard to match that. But given the high expectations, the kind of dirty taste in my mouth from Thrones, and the amount of kind of exposition and plot mechanics and everything this episode had to do, I think it was pretty impressive overall, the fact that it did it without being very noticeable. You get a lot of plot downloads and whatnot that also handle character development at the same time. So I thought it was very well done. Gives me a lot of hope for the rest of the series going forward. How about yourself, sir?
I feel pretty, dude, I liked it. Like, I'm not going to go crazy here and bang the table and rattle the cage and be like, this is great, but I don't know, man. I'm satisfied with it for sure. Like you said, it could never give you that that stunning end of Game of Thrones season 1, and that's okay. It did set the table though for what has all the ingredients for a phenomenal season 1 and beyond. I mean, I can already start to see just plot lines and characters and things developing over the course here just from this first episode, and it didn't bore me. It was a lot of like kind of, I don't know if I'd call it a chess piece episode, but it was close to it kind of to a certain degree. I mean, there was a lot of like setting up here, and I thought they did a great job. I felt right, right away I felt like I was in King's Landing, in the Red Keep, like the set design, everything was perfect. I thought the graphics and how the dragons looked were really cool. And it just took me right back to like, okay, I'm back in Westeros, and that makes me really happy, Magnum Mills. So I got to be honest with you, man. I'm pleased, and I'm cautiously optimistic moving forward here with House of the Dragon.
All right. I also feel the same way. And just for the record here, we're going to do our best with the names and pronunciations and whatnot. But some of these are almost deliberately close and repeated, and we're drinking. So if we forget something, mess something up, we'll try to, punish ourselves, via one drink. But we'll see how it goes. And we'll just start off kind of from the top, work our way through the episode kind of loosely, chronologically. Want to jump around a little bit, that's okay. And just the way they brought it into it, that's what I was kind of curious about. I was like, how do they get us in? What's the first scene? And they went with what I'm calling like the Lord of the Rings joint. Like they basically do kind of the narration. Here's what happened. They lay it out. You have King Jaehaerys Targaryen. He lost his sons. So they had a great council who basically voted to select an heir. And they had to choose between the oldest grandchild, Rhaenys, and the oldest grandson, Viserys. And the council chose Viserys because they didn't want to, at least many of them did not want to consider choosing a woman. A few did, which led to Rhaenys being referred to as the queen who never was. How did this whole intro narration whatnot work as far as setting the table for the series for you?
I'm not going to lie, I paused it for a split second because I wanted to read that full paragraph of, 172 years after, like the whole thing. But dude, I thought for as much shit as we had to like learn really quickly, some may call it a cop out. I actually thought it worked really well here. It brought me right up to speed with everything. I enjoyed that little scene, and you could already, here's what's most impressive about it for me, Magnum Mills. In that scene where they're deciding, and it takes you right back into the Red Keep, like automatically the set is fucking perfect. It gives you all the feels like you're there. But what I like about it is just from that scene where the decision is made, the council speaks and they choose Viserys over the female option, right? Even though it felt like she was the better pick, you could already start to see people starting to turn away and form different facets. You could already start to see corruption and erosion kind of happening before our eyes. I thought that was fantastic for the opening scene here.
You nailed it. And they got the important plot points out, right? Like there had to be a choice basically between two siblings, and they went with the dude because he was a dude. It worked for me. It got the main issues out of the way. And I just try to think of a better option. I don't have one. So I'm going to trust what the show did here, right? They laid it out pretty quick. Maybe we get to see more Jaehaerys. I don't know if the show is going to do a lot of flashbacks, but I do know that there are going to be some time jumps. So, strap in and strap on, baby.
Strap in and strap on, and make sure the strap on is ready for war. Mills, one thing I want to talk to you about is, did you find it interesting that there wasn't like an opening theme song? Like they just did like the House Targaryen sign, and that was kind of it.
I'm guessing this is a don't fall for the man in the tailpipe, that they're going, like, even in Game of Thrones, sometimes we would get a shorter title sequence. I'm kind of going with here. They went with the shorter version because the episode already had a long runtime.
Yeah.
But I think they're going to reuse a lot of Game of Thrones themes. So at this point, I don't think we're going to get a completely original theme, at least not right now. Maybe that's one of those things they kind of start working it in, and then by the end of the season, it has its own theme finally. Or maybe they give us different parts of an intro, or maybe they just keep it short because they have a lot to do. Again, it's one of those things, right? It can't really offend anybody. It was just a little thing, so it's just like it's almost over before you happened. I don't know. Maybe that's just one of those things that's going to be lost in the age of streaming. Is so many people now are used to the skip intro button that shows to spend less dough and time on it.
I hope that's not the case.
Same, but it could be.
It could be for sure. I'm hoping that I'm manifesting that you're spot on in the fact that, hey, this was a longer episode. We're gonna just kind of throw that out there for a teaser because, and I like that they use kind of the song there, at the end credits. So I'm curious to see what they do with this. But do you think this is kind of it, or do you think they build on this as the season wears on?
I think they build. I do not think we're going to get a fully original theme soon, and I do not think we're going to get a full-on Game of Thrones map style thing. If anything, I think they'll somehow make it be more about the dragons, and somehow it involves showing, like we used to see kind of in the Game of Thrones intro where we were going. Maybe here it'll be kind of more what dragons we'll see or something like that.
This episode doesn't waste any time in giving us some serious dragon porn, and boy, oh boy, was it good. How did the scene of Rhaenyra flying in on her dragon Cyrax work for you, especially compared to some of the dragon rider scenes we saw in the later seasons of Game of Thrones with Daenerys and Jon riding the dragons? How did this one work for you with her strapped up there, Magnum Mills?
CGI was at least as good as it was on Thrones, maybe a little bit better. Especially we do see kind of more cloud action, very well lit. Again, I think to kind of get rid of some of those complaints about how dark the show could be at times when they were showing the dragons, especially in the latter seasons. It worked for me, and it seems that she knows what she's doing, right? Like Rhaenyra's up there, she's on a saddle. Like it always kind of bugged me that Daenerys never got a saddle. Like she was just kind of up there, like winging it. Like what is she really grabbing onto? This makes some more sense. And again, it seems like even though when she lands, like they don't have total control over the dragons, they have a system, right? Like they have dragon wranglers, dudes who can speak Valerian to the dragons, just way more planned and thought out. And it just goes to show you, like between whatever time the dragons died and Daenerys' dragons were born, almost all that knowledge was just lost. So no one really had any fucking clue. Like, really, we love Jurassic Park and shit, but if there were dinosaurs tomorrow, we'd just be guessing on what to do, like what to feed them, how to treat them, like how much exercise does a fucking dinosaur need? Dragons are dinosaurs, but with fire.
Fantastic point, Magnum Mills. I honed in on the fact that I thought like the city, like it did a great job of showing you King's Landing as she was kind of like starting to swoop in over the city. I thought that was really cool, and it kind of brought me there really quickly. And I was like, oh wow, this and honestly, the city looked that relatively in a state of peace. Like it looked like it was in good shape, kind of. Last time we saw King's Landing, it was being burnt to the fucking ground. So this was kind of an interesting thing here to see it that from that standpoint. But I like the visual there.
In the scene where they land here, we also meet a couple of major to semi-major characters. So we get our close friend Alicent Hightower, who is the daughter of Otto Hightower, Hand of the King, and we meet Sir Harold Westerling. He is the Knight of the Kingsguard, who is assigned to guard Rhaenyra. Any thoughts on the introductions to these characters?
Not really, Magnum Mills. I thought they did a pretty good job of kind of letting you know right away without telling you who the hell these people are, right? Like right away, I figured Alicent was either A, her maid, or B, her best friend, or C, a combination of both. So it kind of worked out to kind of know exactly what that was. And I like the dialogue, and I like kind of the chemistry between those two early on. And then Sir Harold, I don't know about you, but he's kind of got potential of like, could he be on the level of some of the more epic dudes that he looks like from Games of Thrones? Like, could he be potential for a for that type of fit here? I hope so.
Absolutely. He's played at Sir Harold Westerling. He's played by Graham McTavish, that Scottish actor. Been in a bunch of shit. He was in The Witcher recently. He played Dwalin, one of the dwarves in the Hobbit movies. And if you ever watch Preacher on AMC, a little bit underrated show. He played the Saint of Killers, who was maybe my favorite character on that show. And yeah, Alicent,
He felt like a Davos, didn't he? Like he felt like he could potentially be a Davos for
he's
me.
got like mischievous Davos energy, kind of. He's got some. I like the energy he's putting out. Like he was.
Same, bro.
There wasn't a lot of fun in this episode, and he initially struck me as one of the most fun parts to despite being a member of the Kingsguard. So I think there's definitely some potential there. And as far as Alicent, they're not really friends in the books, but what the show did is they basically aged up Rhaenyra like 10 years. And this actually makes a lot of sense. So again, the show is going to somewhat follow these books, but the books kind of have an unreliable narrator aspect to them. So even though we kind of know the outcomes, there's a lot of different ways stuff can go. So again, even if you think you got spoiled on something, don't worry about it too much. There is really like a red wedding type of situation that you need to worry about.
And we see the small council meeting doesn't feel very small, and we get a huge exposition dump while meeting multiple new characters here. An alliance among the free cities called the Triarchy poses a threat to the Westeros shipping lanes. Prince Damon Targaryen is now the commander of the city watch, and they spend a shitload of money getting it up to his standards. Big expense for the crown. Queen Emma is pregnant, and they are planning a great tournament to celebrate, which will take place during the birth of what Viserys hopes to be his heir. That's right, a son will be born at last. We're also introduced to the Hand of the King, Sir Otto Hightower. Gotta say, Otto is an interesting choice of name, and his master of ships, Corlys Valerian, amongst others, Magnum Mills. A lot of shit happened here at a meeting of the leadership, essentially, for the crown.
I mean, you definitely got immediate vibes of that first Ned Stark small council meeting. I think it was episode 3 of Game of Thrones, where they, again, Robert wants to have the big tournament for Ned. You get kind of the same thing here. What I liked is they went around the table and they didn't have everyone introduce themselves. They let you figure it out based on what they're talking about. But it was pretty easy, right? Like, all right, this guy's got the hand pin. I think I know who he is. He's talking about ships. Bet you he's the ship guy. This guy's talking about coin. Probably the master of coin. This guy's got the chains, probably the maester, the grand maester. Again, they did a good job of mixing character development with exposition and doing a bit of show not tell. It's a nice bit of restraint here because it would be real easy to have everyone introduce himself to like some new person on the council, or have whoever's going around just name everyone and their title for no reason, or even, God forbid, put subtitles under them or something like that. I think this was a classy way to do it, really, and it makes you work a little, right? I think that's a good thing for the show. They shouldn't spoon feed you. Part of what made Game of Thrones great was digging into trying to find your own theories and figure out what's going on and getting your own spin on things. And the show can mean different things to different people, and people can have different interpretations of shit. So I like the kind of the whole undertones and all that, the way they presented it here.
I do too. I thought that was really good. If there's one kind of bone to pick here for me, it was a little bit of, I kind of knew something was looming just because of how over aggressive the series was about having a son, about the birth being his son. It seems like, he was over aggressive here with planning the tournament for the birth of his son, his heir, which he doesn't actually have. It just felt a little bit to me like, oh man, this is a major setup here looming. Thought that might just been a little bit over the top for me to kind of, it made it not as, when we see what happens, it made it not as shocking because I kind of saw it coming a little bit here.
Yes. Again, I think going in, you kind of, at least if you have any idea of what the show has from the trailers or something, like this is one of those shit is going to end badly. Like there is no happy ending to this episode, really. So like you said, it's not a huge surprise, but I think it was well executed anyways. And just for the record, we get our first mention of Damon Targaryen here, who is going to be a major player. They talk about him taking over the City Watch, spending all the dough. Big deal. He's actually the one who gives them the gold cloaks, which is where they get their name, the gold cloaks. And you hear that a bunch of times in Game of Thrones. So there you go. A little bit of connective tissue. After that, we get to meet Damon Targaryen. Good for the show. They don't fuck around. We actually meet him for the first time, and he's sitting on the Iron Throne. The show has kind of made a compromise here between George R.R. Martin's original vision of the Iron Throne, which is like this huge, long, mangled thing, in the original Game of Thrones version. Here, they basically have the Game of Thrones version surrounded by more melted swords on the sides. Happy medium. I think it looks pretty good. And he meets with Rhaenyra, and they kind of have a little whatnot, and they seem to have a pretty good relationship, right? Considering they're going to be one of the main conflicts of the show, I thought it was interesting that they spent the majority of the episode building the relationship up, only to dash it apart. Looking back, of course, it makes a lot of dramatic sense. Well done, really. And your first thoughts on kind of Damon here and his relationship with Rhaenyra?
Yeah, right away, it's like, okay, here comes the ballsy kind of, he was like, I wouldn't say he was exactly Scar, and Mufasa here, and Scar from Lion King, but he was close. You definitely sense that this was he's got a bigger plan that involves maybe being a little bit more sinister towards his family to get what he wants. I also sense kind of a weird, maybe not weird, but there was kind of a unique relationship here that when he put the necklace of the Valerian, steel around Daenerys, it was a little around Rhaena, around when he put the necklace, the Valerian steel necklace around Rhaenyra. Fuck me! God damn it!
But again, that's kind of the show, right? They put incest on the table.
So I was starting to think. Did you sense it? There was a little bit of.
You're wondering what the relationship was, right? Like
Yes.
It seemed like there could be multiple levels to it, and I'm guessing that was deliberate. I'm guessing the show chose to make that deliberately ambiguous, where you're like, oh, do they have a thing, or are they just kind of close? Because
well, and then later in the episode, we see when Damon's in the whorehouse, he's struggling to kind of stay focused intimately. He's asked if I can even find one with silver hair for you.
Yeah, silver hair maiden. Yeah.
So the implication is, he likes ones that look like him. So again, the show has made, I wouldn't say made incest cool, but they've certainly made it acceptable.
It's on the table.
Degree.
We have to consider it. It's on the table. We have to consider it. And I will say that when you at the funeral scene too, you see he is the only one who's really kind of kind to her. And that definitely seemed more of a straightforward uncle to niece kind of thing. But again, they've also kind of played with the ages here. So you're also not sure. Again, you could tell me that they're 12 years apart in age or 28 years apart in age, and I'd probably believe either.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the Targaryen look too, so
you don't
they have
really
a very
know.
very specific look. Imagine going to like their local bar, dude. Like if you were a dark haired, like you got a brunette going in there, you would stick out like oof.
Well, yeah, I mean, Allison sticks out. It's like, okay, so she clearly isn't one of them, and they've like you said, it's a very particular look the Targaryens have.
Yeah, and that's why they don't need landing lights to land their dragon at night. They just get a bunch of Targaryens out there around where they want to land, and they just show their hair, and that's good enough. It's like Bruce Willis and Die Hard 2. They can just land the dragon right in there just based on all the moonlight reflecting off of the hair.
By the light of the moon and the sparkle of the silver hair.
And, we get a little bit more with Allison here. You just mentioned, like, do you think she is going to be a major player? Like, we didn't know right away that she was the daughter of the Hand of the King. We do find out fairly quickly. She's being kind of sent back and forth. Weirdly enough, I think she's maybe the character who has the contact with almost, with the most characters throughout this episode, right? At one point or another, I think she shares a scene with almost everybody. So even though she doesn't seem major now, right? Like, she could be creeping on the come up Bone Thug style.
Oh, dude, I think she's East 1999. I mean, she was literally in a scene with Otto alone. Tons of scenes with Rhaenyra where she literally is like controlling the scene, so to speak. She's kind of the lead, and then we saw her kind of alone in the private chambers with Viserys. So,
but you kind of get this scene right where Rhaenyra is kind of laying with her head in her lap and says she loves this position, and then talks about running away with her on a dragon and eating only cake. Shout out Only Cake. Maybe get yourself a chocolate cake shake from Portillo's in Chicago. I don't know. Again, same thing here. I'm assuming these women are of age, but I got a little bit of vibe, like maybe not like that they were, in a relationship or something, but maybe that there was a little bit of attraction there or something like that. I don't know.
I mean, Mills, let's just say what it was. I was watching this thing. I was like, are they gonna bang? Am I sensing some banging kind of energy here?
There was some B. There was some B on that.
There was some BE, dude,
and it wasn't breaking and entering.
It wasn't a B and E. It was BE totally with a little banging energy. I mean, I'm not gonna lie about it. A little bit of banging energy was going on.
I mean, great chemistry. Nothing really wrong with that
great
or whatever.
Chemistry.
Assuming everyone is of age and consenting or whatever, knock yourself out.
Like Jadakiss.
But again, I think the show's doing that somewhat deliberately, right? They're trying to give you the idea that anybody could be plotting on anybody. Anybody could be banging anybody. And they should, right? It's a pilot episode. You want to leave as many doors open as possible.
Yes, and that's part of what made Game of Thrones was you never know who was going to backstab somebody and who could possibly bang somebody and form an alliance with somebody. I mean, or who could kind of whore off their kids to, like, anything and everything is on the table, dude.
Or someone like Peter Baelish, like Littlefinger could get the Iron Throne. Like that would be unthinkable, really. But then when you start learning the
Could
behind the
have
scenes
happened.
machinations, you're like, oh shit, like Littlefinger's a player. So I think that's what
Yes,
we need to be
dude.
looking out for, like who is going to be kind of one of those low key players. And it can feel like Allison could be one of those characters, right? Like her pops thinks that he's using her to get himself in position. Then she backstabs him because she's in position.
Right. She's already in position and cannot wait to see what happens with her. But I love to, just to put an explanation point on this, Mills. I love that the show is saying, hey, we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to keep you guessing in terms of power struggles and who's who. And that's awesome. And everything's on the table, including incense. They do a great job with it. Mills, we get our first look at Damon Targaryen in action when he leads the City Watch on just a brutal, savage patrol of the city in an effort to reduce crime before the upcoming tournament. I mean, this was just absolutely fucking brutal, right? I mean, we literally see a dude getting dismembered, hands being fucking chopped off at the wrist. I mean, this was gruesome, high quality gore. And what does that tell you about Damon? Does this kind of back up your initial thoughts when you saw him sitting in that chair, just bold and full of balls here, or what?
Yeah, I mean, even +1 in balls, right? Because they did. I don't know if he didn't do that one personally. He just took the heads personally, and that should be a thing. And they do mention it. Like when someone came time to be executed, like Ned Stark, he swung the sword himself. So, for better or worse, you can give him credit for that. Yeah, it definitely seems that's him, right? Like he's ruthless, ambitious, but also smart enough to like understand how people perceive him, to understand how to like market himself to the small folk the way Marjorie Tyrell did, where that was a problem for, say, Stannis Baratheon. Like, even though Stannis Baratheon, in theory, had the best claim and tried to be virtuous for the most part outside of the Red Woman, it didn't matter because he was basically had the personality of a slug and he couldn't relate to the people he wanted to get to follow him. Yeah, a little bit of a flex here, right? Definitely a little bit of a flex by Damon. I think he wants to create conflict with the small council, with his brother, try to shake shit up, and also to show, right? Like these are his guys now. They spent all this money, but all they did was basically give this dude an army. Like, oops, right?
Yeah, and you can tell he wants to play the string puller on the council and wants to create enough doubt and division where maybe his brother feels like only person he can trust is him. So then therefore he's in complete control of the situation. There's no more Otto, there's no more people kind of doubting him. He has complete control. So you can kind of sense that that's where he's going. You know who he reminds me of, Magnum Mills? He reminds me of the brother in Vikings, right? Back me up on this. Damon Targaryen feels a lot like the brother of the main character in Vikings. But we've got lots of rivalries brewing here because they set up a rivalry here between Otto Hightower, the Hand of the King, and Damon Targaryen, the brother of the king. And we see Damon go out of his way multiple times to fuck with him throughout this episode. Do you like what the show is setting up here? I mean, how badass was it when he was picking his first opponent?
For his first challenge, Prince Damon Targaryen chooses Sir Gawain Hightower of Old Town, eldest son of the Hand of the King.
This dude's got double big balls here, right? I mean, come
and
on.
then he asked for the favor from Alicent, his daughter.
Yeah, that's
Double
dicking.
So, again, I think that's a good job of the show, right? They're not going out of their way to have somebody tell a story about how bad Damon is or something like that. They're just showing us instead.
Yeah.
In the same way to create the rivalry. In the one thing I thought is maybe we're going to find out there was something deeper, right? Like he stole money or screwed him out of a job or banged his wife or something like that. And it doesn't turn out there was any of that. It just seems to be the fact that Damon ultimately feels that he was wronged because his brother never asked him to be Hand of the King. And Otto Hightower's had that job for a minute. Like he actually had the job under King Jaehaerys for a while. So he's like a very rare hand who has now served two different kings. And so you get the idea, right? Like when a dude kind of like survives multiple administrations, I don't know. You get the idea that this dude might be thinking like, all right, like I've got some power here. Or, maybe he does have power. Maybe he thinks he's more powerful or influential than he is. I think it's definitely setting Otto up to be very interesting, especially when it shows that he might be willing to put his daughter on the front lines to get what he wants or to further himself in this Game of Thrones.
Dude, I love the addition of Otto here, and that's a great tidbit here to talk about. I mean, making it through two leadership regimes, one was 60 years of peace. So he probably was on, part of that, and then into this next one where it was not necessarily controversial, but it wasn't like a straight up like the son of the king, the oldest son, got it. It wasn't traditional. They had to have a special vote, right? So that creates a little bit of doubt and just allows just a sliver of controversy in terms of people kind of spreading out here and saying, well, maybe that isn't the right fit. So I like this character a lot. I think spot on the acting. I love the accent right away. The fucking dead stares that Otto Hightower can give somebody is crippling, bro. I like when this dude just looks at you because you feel it.
The hand of the king's always been a tricky position, right? Like it seems from the time we've known, Ned Stark was really kind of the only good hand of the king. Although I actually say Tyrion was a good hand of the king, but he was only there to represent Tywin, who was technically hand of the king. So it was more like an interim coach situation. I don't know. I think they set Otto Hightower up to appear like the good guy early in the episode, and then kind of be one of those things where as you go along, by the end of the episode, you're like, oh, maybe this guy ain't so fucking good. And I think they did a good job of that. And I hope they keep him heavily involved because he seems like, an interesting character who maybe doesn't have a lot to lose.
Was it the scene where he tried to whore off his daughter that made you think maybe he wasn't the best of characters?
Yeah, and in Fire and Blood, he does basically like again the age. It's a little bit different as far as the times, but he also sends her to comfort King Jaehaerys too. So yeah, this isn't really kind of the first time that
Not his first rodeo.
dad is willing to go there.
He's pimping her.
And that kind of wraps up the small council stuff. And the show makes a really interesting choice here. They have two major scenes. They have the big tournament that we've heard about that Damon Targaryen is going to be fighting in. And then they have Queen Aemma giving birth to her child, or trying to give birth to her child is probably the more accurate way to say it. And the show elects to kind of intercut these, to cross-cut between the two scenes. I thought it worked pretty well. It definitely built the tension up. Just to make it easier to talk about, let's kind of split them in half. Start with the tournament part of it. Jamie G, any thoughts on the big tournament here we see with the jousting, which evolves into some hand-to-hand. Ultimately, Damon Targaryen does have to tap out. Thoughts on the tournament?
I enjoyed it right away. It kind of took me back to Robert Baratheon's tournament, and I enjoyed the subtle references to the Baratheons. This was the first time we kind of heard that name in the show, and I enjoyed those little subtle references and some of the talk around the Baratheons. You start to see some of the other houses, which I thought was cool, but I really enjoyed it. I was hoping for more than just one game, which is where they're basically running at each other with the thing and trying to joust each other out. I was hoping for a few more like Robin Hood Men in Tights games, right, where it's like a bunch of different shit. That would have been. They're not men, they're men in tights, tights, and I thought that would have been great. But I did enjoy this. I thought it was pretty well done, and I like the fact that there was a lot going on, kind of in the press box suite, if you will, right? With the king and kind of his family and his people there. There was a lot of like separate shit. This was the first time we realized that the queen that never was and Corlys are married. That was kind of cool. That they're a couple, and you kind of start to see. I like that we saw Rhaenyra come in late, and he just kind of give her that glance again, kind of setting up, well, is she really ready to take on leadership because she's not on time to shit? That was the second time she was late to something. So thought that was interesting as well.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up the tournament, the Hand of the King tournament Robert Baratheon put on for Ned. Just feels bigger, right? It was a show showing off their budget. Like you didn't get wide shots, and the box here feels so much bigger and lived in. whereas it seemed like we knew almost all the characters in that box. Here, there's all these new people, right? Kind of like, oh, what is all this? What is going on? And they're all talking to each other, making wagers. You actually see King Viserys has the cat's paw dagger. That's the dagger Arya Stark ultimately uses to kill the Night King. We see it again later in the episode where he's describing, Aegon's dream of a song of ice and fire to Rhaenyra. So that's a pretty cool callback. And like you said, we do hear some famous family names, most notably the Baratheons, when this random dude from Dorne ultimately unseats both the Baratheons and beats Damon. I have to say, I thought they were introducing this dude so that we'd see Damon later in the episode, like killing him because he was pissed off. I definitely thought that was going to happen.
Yeah, I did too. It seemed like it was set up that way. Like,
yeah, he could see like, okay, I'll yield, and then he gets drunk at the brothel and goes and finds the dude and murks him, right?
Yep. Oh,
that's what I thought was going to happen. So shout out the show for subverting my expectations.
Yeah, the stars were aligned for that. I like that they didn't go there, and I enjoyed the fact that while Damon chose Alicent to give him his honor, I enjoyed the fact that this guy, the Dornish guy, he went to Rhaenyra. I thought that was pretty cool too.
Yeah, and I think we're supposed to wonder
for her favor.
Right, yeah, I think we're supposed to wonder a bit because at this point in the Game of Thrones timeline, I believe Dorne hasn't fully been brought into the fold. They're sort of like a territory and associated, but not technically one of these 7 kingdoms left. So it's kind of interesting that they bring up Dorne a little bit here. I don't know if it's something that the show is going to get into, right away or very deeply or whatever. But, for the record, that was Sir Kristen Cole. And he's got a good name. So if nothing else, he would have a career in late 90s soft alt rock. Maybe he could be featured on a Wallflowers album.
It's all the small things.
That's
Magnum Mills.
I'm pretty sure.
I know. I just had to do a Blink-182 reference.
Yeah, you couldn't get no one headlight shit up in here, dude.
Yeah, no. I mean, with one headlight, dude. The Wallflowers for sure. And it was tough to watch, but we have to talk about the tragedy of Queen Emma here. I mean, what did you think of this? And did you know right away that things were going to end badly? And for those of you that might not have seen this, this was especially gory. I mean, this was some high quality gore, dude. I mean, it was graphic as hell.
Oh, and even the sounds, like they did a good job of not showing too much, right? There were just some sounds and a little bit of blood, not even a lot of blood. It made it worse. It was kind of like Jaws where you didn't see the shark. I thought this was done tastefully well for what it is. But think about how fucking impossible of a choice this was. Like, in theory, like there's no way to say, I mean, there's again similar ethical experiments or what have you. But even you pick one, right? And you definitely have a chance that your son or daughter is going to resent you for choosing them over their mother. Same way, if you choose Emma, she might resent him if she survives and the child doesn't. You can't win, right? Like, I think the show did a good job of making that clear, but it also seemed pretty obvious that Viserys was always going to choose the son, right?
Yes, but with that said, he chose the son with great pain and torture. Like, he was not comfortable during that. That was not easy for him. That shit affected him, dude. Like, that's one thing I like. Like, I knew he was gonna, once they were like, there's a chance that the son could live, the child could live. I knew he was going to do that. But dude, he did it. It wasn't like it was an easy choice. And that's one thing I respect about what they did with him in the great acting work. You felt that that was painful. And I gotta say, I like the fact they referred to baby as babe. That's kind of a cool thing throughout this too, is the babe. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, they have done that, and I don't think they're referring to the early 90s movie where John Goodman tried to portray Babe Ruth. A little bit underrated, actually. Not that bad of a flick. I think they did their best with what ultimately was a doomed plot line, and it made a lot of sense, right? Like, there's a lot of hubris of A, assuming you're going to have a son, and then B, trying to time his birth with a celebration ceremony. Like, even in this day and age where they talk about the birth success is like 50-50, I mean, if we're under Shaq's free throw percentage here, like, yeah, dude, you have to really consider your options. Like, you should not be publicly announcing. Like, when he announces she goes into labor, I was just like, ooh, yeah. At the end, you hear the baby just kind of like give that little kind of like little cough gurgle thing, and I was just like, oh boy. And then they go right to the funeral. Yeah, it was well done, but definitely fucking, again, brutal, but a different kind of brutal. Again, the jousting scene, kind of fun. Birthing scene, not so fun. And then it goes from not so fun to just even worse when we get to the funeral scene. At first, you kind of see, oh, it's Queen Emma, and then you see the smaller body also wrapped up, and Rhaenyra has to get Syrax to do the Dracarys and burn the bodies as a Targaryen tradition. And how do you feel that the show elected to tell us that the baby Balon did not survive in this fashion?
I actually liked it because you don't see it at first. Like, you could sense that it was coming. And again, as you just mentioned, that little whimper and that little sick kind of cough, as he was holding the baby, it was almost like, I don't know, created enough doubt. But I like that the camera initially, focused in on Emma and her body. And then you're like, ah, shit, man. And you're kind of taking in the fact that you're like mummified, wrapped, and all this. And then you get and this worked well throughout the times, and like watching a Western film and it's like a little casket, instead of a full size. Same concept here. I thought it worked really well. And what I love about this is you go from that directly to the face of Viserys. And dude, the amount of guilt and sadness and pain on that dude's face, really strong work. And it seemed like, I don't know if they've got a ability to control the weather or not, but was this not the perfect weather for this fucking funeral? I mean, slight overcast, looked a little bit chilly, kind of gray. There was no sunshine when she gone, only darkness every day. I mean, this was really good weather for this funeral, and I just thought the whole thing worked for me, Mills.
Same for me. I did like that Damon did share kind of like, again, as we talked about before, a bit of a sympathetic moment with Rhaenyra before, and then her struggling to get the Dracarys out and make it happen. Yeah, just brutal, right? And it leaves Viserys, and that's the idea, right? They're doing a proper job from a plot standpoint to take him to where he needs to go to change his mind. It's just, damn, dude. Sorry, man. That's a one drink for you, dude. Sorry, Viserys, man. You had a bad fucking week, dude. And you still paid for that whole tournament.
That's tough. I don't know about you, Magnum Mills, but I felt a little like Viserys when the show took us right from the funeral, boom, right to the discussion of a successor. I mean, nobody seems wild about Damon being next in line, but Viserys, strangely enough, defends him. Of course, when he demands to know if the others think that his brother will murder him and take his crown, we see that Damon is secretly watching and listening to the meeting from the opposite room. This is the classic Game of Thrones type stuff that we're looking for here, right? I mean, kind of sneaking around, looking through the hole in the wall, right? I mean, this is that shit, right?
Oh, it's right up there with if Varys had guest starred on Scooby-Doo back in the 70s. I'm like, it's Viserys and Sonny and Cher sneaking around in the castle secret passageways. It definitely is interesting that Damon knows about the passageways, and it seems that Viserys does not. And especially when you heard like, oh, no one had seen him, and then he would just walk through the city gates. You get the idea like he could be creeping around for a while, right? Setting up plans and shit like that. So that's definitely, we're not quite into predictions, but I do think that he's got a bit of a Transformers thing going on. Damon does, then that there's more than meets the eye. Like, he is working on some of these things, and he might even be engineering some of this conflict. So that's Game of Thrones, right? That's exactly what we want. Like, you can't that's what I was looking for, at least. Very happy with this.
Happy to have it. I mean, you don't sit your ass on the Iron Throne without the king knowing, and have a meeting without knowing your way around the back alleys here, the Red Keep and King's Landing, for sure. And we finally get the big confrontation between Viserys and Damon. There aren't any dragons here, but mad fire is being spit, mostly by Damon, who accuses Viserys of being weak. What'd you think about this clash of the brothers here?
It was coming, right? It, whether you want to make the "that's what she said" joke or not, it seemed inevitable. Damon obviously has designs on the throne, and Viserys is now broken, right? And he tells him that, like,
My family has just been destroyed. But instead of being by my side, O Rhaenyra's, you chose to celebrate your own rise, laughing with your whores and your leg spittles.
I think that's one of the things I wasn't quite sure about is when he initially summoned Damon, did he think that he was going to, change his heir to Rhaenyra? My thought was, yeah, probably, but he was hoping that Damon could offer him some reason to talk himself out of it. And it just, when, Damon kind of said the truth to him, that was enough to put him over the edge. And it seems like, I don't know, one of those real relationships, right, with brothers or something where you don't want to necessarily like lie, but you don't want to tell the hard truths either. And they finally both, more or less, for what it's worth, did the social media thing and just firebombed each other with what they actually thought.
What struck me about this scene, Mills, was it was almost like Viserys wanted to believe that Damon didn't say that. Like when he asked him, "Did you say that?" It was almost like like you didn't, right? Like he was ready to go ham on his ass, but he didn't want to, and part of him believed, "No way, my brother would say that." That's what struck me, and that's where you kind of see some of the weakness maybe of Viserys. I don't know that he's full on ready to murder a family member. And I think when you're the king of the throne and peeps are coming after it, you got to be able to.
I mean, you get the idea. In this moment, his blood was up, and he might have let his Kingsguard go at it. But ultimately, he doesn't ride a dragon any longer, and Damon does. Letting him leave that room after having that confrontation and making the decision to basically undo him as the heir. Yeah, dude, that takes some balls. But on the other hand, I'm not sure he thought this through all the way.
Yeah, might have been an emotional decision, to
Might have been a
say the
half
least.
measure. We've heard it even through this episode. If you've ever watched Better Call Saul, you never do half measures. And disavowing him as a successor and sending him in theory back to the runestone or whatever, that's a half measure. If he knew his brother was actively plotting against him and was willing to basically make fun of his dead child and wife, he should have never left that throne room.
Agreed, Magnum Mills, and I think it's telling to kind of see early on here Viserys may not have what it takes, and we do get a scene of Viserys telling Rhaenyra that she is now his heir, and it's intercut with the scene of the Lords of Westeros swearing fealty to Viserys and his new heir, Princess Rhaenyra. How did this work for you? I mean, it wasn't exactly an 80s montage out of like Ski Club, but it was pretty cool.
You obviously knew that this was coming in some way, shape, or form from the previous scene. I liked how he did approach Rhaenyra. It felt more as an equal, right? And he seemed legitimately apologetic, and maybe losing his wife and son made him realize, what his wife had always kind of felt, that she could be a good queen, and that, maybe having a vagina doesn't disinclude you from possibly being a good ruler. Who knew? And yeah, I thought it all really worked here. I thought the intercutting worked well. If you had focused on any one scene for too long, I don't think it would have worked. Going back and forth here has its advantages, especially you get to see her kind of like putting on the full garb, and then you get to see some of the lords who we know, but most notably a Stark, vowing to basically, accept her as the queen of Westeros and then the next ruler and Viserys' legitimate heir.
I like the mesh up here, Mills. I thought it was really cool. I like being down kind of in the graveyard, so to speak. And I thought it was a great shot of the big ass skull of the dragon there. And I enjoyed this, dude. And I enjoyed this version of Viserys where he's kind of leveling up with her. And it makes me excited about how Rhaenyra takes us going forward. It also, I couldn't help thinking when I was watching the scene, what does this mean for his cousin, the queen that never was? How is she going to take this news?
I mean, that's interesting because you definitely see her, husband Corlys Valerian referred to as the sea snake here. Like, he throws it out there at the small council thing when they're talking about succession. I have to think that's going to be a thing. For what I understand, at the most part at this time, they kind of control the seas and everything. So I think it's definitely an interesting conflict and something you're gonna have to keep track of, because I think they're definitely going to be their own faction in the Game of Thrones, right? Like, they're not going to necessarily be for Damon or for Rhaenyra. They might be on their own side. We get all the cross-cutting, we get the cameos, but then we get something new, even to book readers, and down kind of in the catacombs by the the skull of the great Balerion the Dread, the huge dragon. We get to hear Viserys tell Rhaenyra the big family secret.
It was a dream. And just as Daenerys foresaw the end of Valyria, Aegon foresaw the end of the world of men. Just to begin with a terrible winter, gusting out of the distant north.
And we know this. He's basically describing the White Walkers and whatnot, all the threat behind the wall from the north, the great darkness, the winter is coming, yada, yada, yada. I don't mean to yada, yada here, but it's kind of a big deal because this was not originally a thing that George R.R. Martin had conceived. He approved it for the show. He swears to God he's going to work it into the Winds of Winter or A Dream of Spring. And if they ever come out, that would be great, but don't plan too much of them coming out. But point being, it gives a greater purpose to the Targaryens. They didn't just come over here to escape the doom. They came over here with a purpose to save mankind overall. And a Targaryen has to sit on the throne in order to push back the darkness. How'd you think about this? Like, this is probably the most direct Game of Thrones callback. And I think it's also designed to, if not humanize, but make us sympathize with the Targaryens a little more, right? Like, they're vicious rulers, but because they have a greater purpose. Did this work for you?
I like this, dude. I enjoyed the fact that, like, this, how he worked it into the conversation with her. It's kind of like, there's one more thing I need to tell you. And it was right as the intercut was kind of reaching its peak, he was telling her this information. So I like the callback here. I also like that he referenced, I don't know anyone who's named a dream, but if you were going to name a dream, A Song of Fire and Ice, I think that's pretty cool. So I enjoyed that. And it just makes you think, like, it was kind of one of those, like, oh wow moments where it's like you kind of see things on like this macro level now that we've watched Game of Thrones start, proceed, and conclude, and we kind of know the story. It was really neat to kind of catch this aspect of it early on here at House of Dragon. Gave this neat kind of like macro perspective of it for me.
Yeah, I've heard a couple of complaints that like this matches up too cleanly for Game of Thrones, which is supposed to happen, roughly like almost 200 years into the future. Like, mostly the technology and everything seems to be the same. But I would more interpret this as, like, once the Targaryens kind of got there, they had the dragons, everything kind of plateaued. There really wasn't any incentive for anybody to really evolve or do other things. You could look at it both ways, but I do like the idea that we're kind of looking at the Targaryens right here at their absolute peak. Like, this is as good as it will ever get for the Targaryens. Like, this, might as well have been like a wedding. Everyone's having drinks, having a good time, because right after this, the war is going to start, and things will never be the same again. Shout out Ghostface Killa, featuring Raekwon and Colonel Thomas.
And Mills, one last thing about this kind of family legacy, family secret, so to speak. I think it also, it creates kind of insurmountable pressure. It creates, just this need to always be on top. And I like that. Like, it's not just about losing control or losing the throne. It's a far greater purpose. I mean, how many rulers have just thought, like, my job is to maintain control in our family for all of time. That's enough. But when you also have to, like, save all of mankind, it levels up and I like that they do that on the show. I mean, maybe it's fan service, but dude, who cares? Why do we apologize for saying fan service? Like, thank you, like, for giving us something that we like.
Yeah, you just don't want it to be, it's like sugar or candy, right? Like, you just don't want to eat so much of it that you're sick the next day. Like, you don't want that to be the empty calories of the episode. You want it to be the cherry on top. And I think here they did a good job mixing it up. And also, because you do want to give a bit of a hook for the Game of Thrones people and make it feel like, it's all connected. You'd rather be more Marvel than DC, I think, as far as the narrative structure of your cinematic or HBO universe. The HBO universe. We're still waiting for the True Detective Westeros version. To bring in True Detective back would be crazy if it was set in Westeros, right? I'd be there for that. Or even that if they do fifth season of Westworld, I'm down with like Dragon World. Set it in Dragon World, dude. Do it, dude.
Why couldn't you?
Because you have to ask yourself, was there really enough drinking and dragons in this episode? I think dragons, yes, right amount. We needed some dragons. We got them. What we saw looked good, very cool, but minimal drinking, really, right? Like for a Game of Thrones episode where there's a huge tournament and everything, again, a lot of sadness and whatnot, but usually wouldn't there be some drowning of the sorrows, Tyrion style?
I am blown away at the lack of drinking. It frustrates me. I'm like, why are people not? I'm looking around a brothel. I can't even nobody's even drunk. Why is the king not drinking? Why? I mean, he just literally suffered like ultimate tragedy. I guess we were just so used to kind of like bad leadership with like Robert Baratheon and stuff, where it's like, okay, well, bad kings maybe drink and bang their sorrows away. Maybe he's a better. But I was disappointed overall that like there's not a lot of drinking here. I did enjoy that we got two different dragons plus the skull, and both dragons were totally different. I enjoyed that. We saw Damon's dragon was dark and like black and red, like a deep purple and red, and we saw Rhaenyra's dragon was more green and orange. So I thought that was kind of cool too.
Yeah, the show is going to go out of their way to differentiate between the dragons, which is technically correct to the original George R.R. Martin text. Same thing with the names. Like in the show, they would change names because they sounded too close together in Game of Thrones. In House of the Dragon, they're letting it fly. So hence you have like Rhaenyra and Rhaenyra. JVG, pretty easy question here. I just compare and contrast this to the Game of Thrones pilot. I don't necessarily want to know which one is better. Just did you feel this was, kind of similarly effective is the Game of Thrones pilot? Why or why not?
Yes, but I think it had the benefit of Game of Thrones already being done. So, in other words, I think the Game of Thrones, premiere episode needed to be bolder because they didn't have the benefit of already creating a universe of content in Game of Thrones, right? So this one, and you saw that kind of with the way it ended and the way that escalated. Dude, the last 5 minutes of the Game of Thrones premiere, like you see major shit happen in the last 2 minutes. The last minute is insane, right? So with this one, I think
they throw Bran out the fucking window. We've already said there are spoilers, and it's hard to beat that. When a child witnesses incest and gets thrown out a window,
yes,
the things I do for love, it's hard
nuts.
to fucking beat that.
Exactly. So that was wild.
Like here, a king like literally changes his heir, which in theory is a bigger deal because these people have fucking dragons, but it doesn't feel as big.
It doesn't feel as big, but this episode did go places. It was just this episode. It is this episode. I mean, dude, we watched a queen be brutally killed while giving birth, an heir die. I mean, we saw a lot of kind of chess piece stuff. We learned a shitload. It was basically we got a freaking MBA and a single episode here on all things House of the Dragon. But it didn't seem there wasn't as big of shock moments, and I think and that's okay. I think this one worked really well for me. But again, I say that with the caveat of it had the benefit of already having the framework of Game of Thrones done.
I think that's the gift and the curse. I'd call it a draw because you have that ability. Like people understand the shorthand. You don't have to like explain what the fucking small folk are or the idea that there might be dragons or something like that. But on the other hand, you also have the lingering bad taste of how Game of Thrones ended for a lot of people. So I feel at least half the audience is going to be coming into this from a very skeptical perspective. And I think the show did a good enough job of at least diffusing those worries, if not dismissing them entirely. To me, this felt like not a rehash of the Game of Thrones pilot, but it had a similar feel, but with like the budget of a season 3 Game of Thrones episode. Hence the way the tournament felt bigger. the wide shots of King's Landing, that kind of thing. I think it all worked because I mean, think about what they were really dealing with here. You have all right, now it's not just like we're setting up two families or this or that. Like it's one family, they have fucking dragons, like there's crazy gender politics, and everybody looks the same and has a name that sounds similar. This is kind of hard to sell. And I think ultimately the show did a solid job of that. It was a big lift. They didn't do it perfectly. I'm not even sure what a perfect, execution of this would be, how you'd land the double backflip. I think they did good enough for me, and hopefully that, they didn't, that it's going to improve in the future. They laid a solid base here. I feel there's a foundation. Build on that.
Couldn't agree more, Magnum Mills. And let's be honest, man, this was a pretty brutal episode, was it not? I mean, we literally saw body parts getting chopped off, a childbirth gone horribly wrong, and a lot more. I mean, did this level of brutality and gore work for you? I mean, this was far more gory and brutal than the premiere of Game of Thrones, and it's not even close.
Yeah, this is some high level brutality, but I think it makes sense. It's as tastefully done as it can be when you're chopping off balls, hands, and heads. But I think it's because Damon wanted to prove a point, right? Both to show his power and his dissatisfaction, and to also show that King's Landing really did have a fucking problem, probably, with crime. There's a lot of different ways you can go about it. I think the childbirth stuff was as brutal as any dismemberment or beheading that we saw, but it sets a table, right? And it did it in a real and visceral fashion, which is something that was missing from the later seasons of Thrones. So I like we're gonna go, like, it feels like Old Dirty, right? Like raw, or like you're just like gonna go back to like the Brooklyn Zoo kind of.
Shame on you, dude, when you step through too. Brooklyn Zoo. Heirs of the Dragon was a perfectly fine title for this episode, but could they have done better? Give me one alternative alt title here for this, series premiere titled The Heirs of the Dragon.
You stink of dragon. We heard the smell of the dragon referenced multiple times, so if you had to force me to an alt, I would go with Game of Thrones 2.5. The smell of dragons. Shout out Leslie Nielsen. You got one for me?
I can't even, that is untoppable. There's no topping that.
Dude, if you had to describe the vibe of this episode, like in a couple of words or short phrase, describe the vibe of the pilot episode of House of the Dragon.
Cunning, methodical, brutal.
I would have to say my call on the vibe here would be incest murder. It just feels like incest murder is the vibe. Which would also probably be a pretty cool like house track you could get down to with a certain amount of ecstasy and or whatever the kids are doing these days.
Imagine you're bumping a track and they're like, somebody's like, you pick up somebody for a ride and they're like, oh dude, this is sick, what is this? And you're like, yo, this is that incest murder. It's a wild thing, dude. Incest isn't like something easily like promotable. Like that's what's wild about the show.
Murder could even be that you want to murder people who are doing the incest.
That's true too.
Either way,
meanings.
It's all that, it's how you perceive it, man. It's that, have you ever seen dragons when you're drunk? They did a good job here. They introduced a lot of characters, but we really can't expect them to introduce like all the supporting characters all at once. In my heart of hearts, I'm looking for my new Tormund's Giantsbane, my new Bronn. We're going to call this the Bronn Watch. And we're just basically looking out like, all right, who can be like that character? Who's going to be like the view of the people, man, the voice of the people, drop those good lines and kind of just always be that, like rapscallion kind of dude. Jamie G, who you got? Who's like your new Bronn, maybe after one episode, just your most likely candidate, let's call it.
For me, Magnum Mills, I am crossing my heart and hoping. I am going with Sir Harold Westerling, the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. I am hoping he can emerge as a Bronn or a type guy here. That would be absolutely clutch for me. Hoping for it.
I'm gonna go. I mean, I do like that call. I again, shout out Graham McTavish, very great. I will go with Corlys Valerian, the Sea Snake. I think that he has got, some of those snake lines, some of that snap back. He's just waiting, trying to set up his position, make sure that his wife actually becomes queen instead of the queen who never was. They're a very wealthy family. They control the stepstones. They control the seas around Westeros. They are, like Wu-Tang Clan, not something to fuck with. So I'm going to go with the sea snake there, getting a little bit more bold as the episodes go on, and maybe not necessarily being the voice of the people, but at least being the guy who gives us kind of those just cutting lines because he's willing to tell people what he actually thinks instead of, hiding his, not necessarily complimentary comments.
As long as we get somebody doing a Braun, this guy is happy. And Mills, with that
Or
said,
Tormund. Don't sleep on Tormund.
Or Tormund.
I love
Correct.
Tormund. He was the Braun of the North.
That is absolutely
Tormund
correct.
was the Braun of the North. That's how I always refer to it.
And can people start saying Fook? Fookin.
I say Fook all the time. I love Fook.
Fook. Give me a Fook in here, man. I don't know that I caught
Fook
one
and Terrible,
Fook.
dude. Like Terrible Fook. That would be the title of my porno.
Wow. And what
now,
a
if only I
great
could get Charles Barkley to endorse it.
terrible. That's a terrible Fook.
Get Charles on there and be like, I hated this porno. We're like, all right, cool, dude. That's all I was looking for.
Ah, man, it's almost as bad as his golf swing. And now it is time to fill up the trophy room. We're going to hand out some hardwares here for the series premiere of House of the Dragon, titled The Heirs of the Dragon, starting with that hot D, baby, that hot dialogue. That's right. Which is our favorite quote or piece of dialogue from the episode? I'll go first here. Mills, for me, I go back to that scene with Rhaenyra and Alicent, and I really like when, pressed on, what do you want? Rhaenyra responds with,
I want to fly with you on Dragonback, see the great wonders across the narrow sea, and eat only cake.
I'm being serious.
I never just about cake.
Would you sign up for that, dude, if that was your life? It's a rhetorical question. The answer is yes.
I never jest about cake, my friend. I
never jest about cake. It's unjustable. It's unjustable. For me, love that quote. I enjoyed that side of Rhaenyra here. It was interesting to kind of see, I don't know if it's youth innocence here a little bit of just like kind of what she wants. And it's a big deal for me that we go from there to her literally in the chambers, hearing the family secret, realizing she is now the heir. That's a big swing, bro. And you kind of see her dreams of a child, and now all of a sudden she's got to not only rule Westeros and take on, the throne here in a questionable transition, but also what people will question, but also she now is indebted with this need to save humanity and play a role in it. That's a big swing. So for me, this was a big moment in the episode. Enjoyed that quote.
Yeah, I will probably reference that big swing in a minute here. I will give my favorite quote also to Rhaenyra, and this is in that scene when they're downstairs by the Skull of Balerion, and she's talking to Viserys, and he's asking her about what the dragons mean to her, and she says,
Everyone says Targaryens are closer to gods than to men, but they say that because of our dragons. Without them, we're just like everyone else.
Ultimately, I think that's her answer confirms his decision to appoint her as his heir. So for better or worse, pretty good quote, right? Because it made her queen to be, just like, we saw in Coming to America, queen to be. That brings us to the hot fire of the week, sponsored by Dylon. This is our favorite moment or scene from The Heirs of the Dragon. My turn to go first here, and I am going to go with the scene in the throne room where you finally have the confrontation between Viserys and Damon. It really seems like this is maybe the first time in their lives that brothers have actually spoken the truth about how they feel about each other out loud. I don't know if it was really cathartic or therapeutic, but it might have set up the Dance of the Dragons. I think that's a huge scene, sets the table for the series going forward. Jamie G, give me your hot fire of the week, sponsored by Dylon.
That is my 1A, Magnum Mills, so totally agree with you on that, but I'm going to go ahead and give my 1B, and that is that scene in front of the giant skull of the dragon, where Viserys is basically letting Rhaenyra know that she is going to be the heir and passing on the family secret. As much as that scene between Damon and Viserys may have set up, kind of the dance of the dragons and kind of this whole part of the reign of the Targaryens, I think that Rhaenyra becoming the heir has an maybe not equal, but has a large part in that as well. I think this is another component here that is also going to create, you know, eh, it's going to fuel what's going to happen in the future here to this dynasty. So I thought this was a really interesting point in this episode, and I like the fact that we got Rhaenyra showing up late to pour the wine at the council meeting, showing up late to the games, just having those kind of kid moments, just kind of being aloof and daydreaming about just eating cake all day and flying the world with dragons, to her now being like, oh shit, dude, shit just got real. Like, I am going to take on the throne. And we saw this strange like cancer spot on the back of Viserys that could be happening sooner than later. So I thought it was such an interesting switch, and her taking that is controversy in and of itself. And if everything else was sunny in Westeros, this would still cause some sort of erosion. So I think it plays an equal part here, and I really thought that was a powerful scene. And I personally liked the intercut. It wasn't really a montage; it was the cut back and forth. I thought it worked really well.
I agree, dude. That was an excellent scene. And let's be honest, this is House of the Dragon, but everyone is still playing the Game of Thrones, right? So it's time to pick our player of the week. This is our episode MVP for the Heirs of the Dragon. Jamie G, who's your player of the week in the Game of Thrones?
I mean, play on, play out. There's a couple of people I think worthy here. I've got to go with Rhaenyra, though. I mean, she started off this episode kind of, the world was set that she would never be able to rule. She would never be her father's son. So much as so she said that. And she ended this episode becoming the heir. And not only the heir, she will be the first ever queen of the throne. Big deal for me. So she's clearly, leveled up, so to speak. So she is my MVP. Play on, playa. Who you got?
Here. Unanimous. Rhaenyra, hard not to, right? She goes from cupbearer to queen to be by the end of the episode. And maybe she does or does not have Paul Bates singing the queen to be to her, but she deserves it. Shout out, Rhaenyra. You're definitely the MVP of the Game of Thrones so far through one episode, because you made the move again from cupbearer to heir to the throne. It's hard to make a bigger move than that. And you have to be careful because this is Westeros, right? I mean, there's just chains and there's rules and there's roles, and it can all suck. Look, we haven't gotten our chains from the Citadel, so we're not Macers. We got our chains from Slick Rick and Mr. T. That's good enough to qualify us to give a grade to the Heirs of the Dragon. We're going to grade each episode of House of the Dragon on a scale of 1 to 10 dragons. My turn to go first here. I am going to give 8.5 dragons to the Heirs of the Dragon. Solid episode, dude. Had a fucking ton of shit to do. They managed to pull it off. They did not have like a super memorable moment. A little bit disappointed as far as the intro and a lack of maybe a new theme, that kind of thing. But for the most part, this was a very high bar to clear, and I think they cleared it. So you have to give them credit for that. So in theory, I'd give the episode maybe about an 8, but given the degree of difficulty, 8.5 dragons. Jamie G, give me some dragons.
Man, I am the opposite of HTWO here. I'm Mr. Fire himself. I'm right in that same universe with the Magnum Mills. I'm probably just a smidge higher at 8.7 dragons. And here's why. This had so much pressure on it just simply because you had what some wildly consider. I mean, a lot of people consider Game of Thrones to be the greatest television show ever leading up to that final season. And you had so many people disappointed in that final season. This could have been an epic flop. There was a lot riding on this. And I thought they delivered, dude. And there was a lot, man. There was, I mean, I lost track of how many characters we got introduced to. There's 3 or 4 major plot lines that are clear, more to come. There's twists, there's turns. A lot happened in this episode, and they did it with just great execution. No, it wasn't perfect, but it just, they had the ability to bring me right back into Westeros. It was like I was there. It's bigger, it's better in terms of the budget and how it looks, especially dating back to the early, premiere of Game of Thrones. So for me, it's absolutely starts at an 8. 8.5 is fair. I'm giving it an 8.7 just because I really enjoyed this, and I am more excited now than I was going into this and going into this first episode, and that's a win. That's a win, and it should be celebrated. 8.7 Dragon.
This pilot was not an ordinary pilot. It had a lot to do. Give him a lot of credit for that. That brings us to what was one of our favorite parts of Game of Thrones. This is crafting theories, making predictions, and wildly speculating on the next episode. Just please note here, we're going to be discussing the Next Time On trailer and the after the episode bits that they do, and as well as the official Game of Thrones podcast. So if you don't want to hear any of that stuff, just check out now. We'll see you next week. Thank you for tuning in. I don't think that there's a whole lot of spoilers here, but just be warned. Trying to be right up front with it. And dude, you mentioned it before. What's up with that? Wow, none Viserys is back. Like, he talks about being a nick from the Iron Throne, and then you see later in the episode he gets another nick on his hand. What do you think's going? Like, is that just that can't just be like a random thing, right? They wouldn't show it otherwise.
No, it wouldn't have been a thing. Like, something's clearly going on with him, and I don't know if it's early onset of whatever, but that dude, that shit on his back had some shit on its back, bro. I mean, they were just straight up scraping off layers of pus, and you couldn't even get past the pus. We'll see what happens if and when the quarter, I think they agreed to quarterize it, but something happened there, and then his cut at the end there's something to that. Either it's symbolizing something with the throne itself, but I think it's more than that. I think it's actually has to do with him, some sort of weakness. I think his days are numbered, bro. It's not prediction time yet, but I don't know
it's
how many
prediction
episodes.
time. It's prediction time.
I don't know how many episodes he makes it, my dude.
No
Like,
cop outs, no half measures.
I'm gonna say he is my first major character to die here. I think that's probably not even that bold of a statement.
I like that. I mean,
I think he's my first big to go.
That's fair enough, especially because we know there are going to be a few time jumps here. Yeah, I feel like it's something else, even if it's their version of like some skin cancer or something like that. Just looking at that, that did not look like your average wound, especially, or if nothing else, that shit was infected. You should probably get that checked out.
They've been at it for a minute too. Like, bro, they're
I feel like they've been
now.
trimming that back for right. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're dealing with the the symptoms and not the source.
Right.
Not the actual problem. And all right, how about the dude from the tournament who we hear is from Dorne, apparently, Sir Criston Cole. That's the lowborn knight who got the favor and then defeated Damon in the tournament. Again, I thought he would be killed by the end of the episode because Damon was pissed. That didn't happen. It has to be for a reason, right? I mean, is this a way to maybe bring Dorne into the plot, or is he going to be a secret challenger for the affection of, say, Alicent or Rhaenyra or something like that?
Bro, could he be king? I mean, could he really get something with Rhaenyra and end up being, and that's what causes Dorne to become Dorne? I don't know. I'm curious to see, but I think there's a play there other than, hey, I just want to bang, Rhaenyra. I think there's something going on there, but I think he's definitely going to be a character that evolves here at least over the course of the first season and beyond for me.
So definitely not kind of a one and done, or someone just meant to be like a teasing love interest, or like you think he might be in it to win it a little bit, maybe is kind of like our representative of Dorne, at least for the first season or something like that.
I think so.
I think that's pretty fair. All right, dude. Right when you have that big kind of meeting about the Succession stuff, like shout out HBO staying very on brand with the Succession. Otto Hightower then, sends his daughter in to comfort King Viserys, but he did send a raven to Old Town. Like, what do you think was the intent of that raven? The contents? I don't even want to necessarily know exactly who he was sending it to, but was that like something to help the king or something maybe serving his own ends?
I think something to make sure he makes it through a third regime. I think it's something to say, hey, the world needs to prepare itself. We are about to have the first female leader. And if anyone wants to take that from her, maybe the time is getting closer to do so. I just find it hard to believe that if something happens to Viserys, everyone's just going to let that transition happen without any pushback. So I think there is going to be people who are going to fight that, and I think that's going to happen sooner rather than later. And I think Otto Hightower is a dude who you cannot trust.
Well, I mean, I think that's the case because Otto Hightower wants the throne for himself, right? From what I understand, his wife is dead. He has no sons. It's just him and Alicent. So he couldn't want the throne for her. So kind of like Littlefinger, right? He has to manufacture a path to the throne for himself with no familial claim. That's tough. High degree of difficulty right there, baby. I mean, but that's it. I mean, how does he otherwise? What's his path? Sort of just kind of kill everybody and hope for like a mass kind of like rumble in the jungle type of primary to get him there.
The other path is, let me put it this way, Magnum Mills. If he wants to make Rhaenyra queen right away, so he has control over a child running the throne, I could see that because, if Viserys dies, she has no family. She has no mom and dad. She has her uncle, but he's been banished. In theory, Otto Hightower might be thinking, if I have Rhaenyra as the queen, I am essentially sitting on the throne because she is a teenager or a child or an adolescent, however old she is. That is going to be a big adjustment. So I think that might be his play a little bit here too. Could be.
I'll buy that for 50 cents or whatever. It makes sense, but he has a plan, right? Because it seems to me that two people have
Yeah.
plans right now. You have Damon, you have Otto Hightower. Those, to me, seem to be the two dudes who are most ready to contend for the Game of Thrones as far as a long-term plan. Like, Rhaenyra is now at the top of the charts, but she just got thrust there unexpectedly. So I think it's fair to say she probably doesn't have a plan. And Alicent Hightower is going to be a big deal, right? Because she, in theory, is connected to all of these people. Short of maybe Damon is the one that she doesn't have the strongest connection to, but even she did give him her favor at the jousting and whatnot. So the show did a good job of seeding this all the way through. Very interested in seeing where they go with that. Where do you think that goes? Like with Alicent, is King Viserys? He's not going to go there, right? Because she's a fair bit younger. Is that what the implication was?
Boy, that would be really tough, especially considering, now that all he has left is Rhaenyra. Like, that would be really hard to go there with Rhaenyra because it's like, okay, now your best friend, your confidant, as you take on this huge news of becoming heir. Now she's sleeping with, and we'll find out just how sinister and how manipulative Alicent is if she pushes that any further. Because if she drives that and makes that so, and has volition to kind of make it a reality, I think that could be a thing where it's like, okay, now she has bigger plans. And this is what's great, dude. We're one episode in and we're already thinking about, conspiracies and shit between all these guys. I love that. You gotta give them a hats off to him for doing that one episode in.
Well, hey, I mean, I've read Fireblood, so I can probably give you a couple answers. But B, I like that you're on the Nas shit. Like now we're into big things, right? Like we're just trying to break down like who because one of these characters probably that we're all excited about is going to like unceremoniously die 3 episodes from now. Theoretically, right? Like because that's not to say people had to die to enjoy Game of Thrones, but it felt like in the later seasons, way too many people had way too much plot armor. So it would be nice to kind of re-emphasize the rules, like real rules. Like you fuck up, you could actually die. I think that's important. And kind of speaking on that, what's Damon's first move? Like, I think he has a plan. In theory, he still controls the gold cloaks. He's got a dragon. What do you think his first move is?
The interesting thing is, I don't know if he thinks he could A, kill his brother and convince his niece to let him rule, or if now he has to kill both. I don't know which way he's willing to go, but something tells me he's willing to kill both, and that sets up those opening scenes with him and Renaria a little bit more, where he was more attentive and caring, and she was like, "Does my father know? Good. I want to talk to him alone." Like that kind of like intimate relationship that they kind of you sense that they had a little bit. That would make for a really interesting development. But I think he's going to. Um, he took his woman. I think he's going to kind of regroup, get his army behind him. And I don't know that he's going to act on sheer violence in a big scene. I think it might be more of a sneakier attack here, dude. Maybe a little silent but deadly type stuff. I'm going with that more than anything. Maybe he's pulling a string that lets something else happen. Maybe he doesn't have to whip it out. Maybe he can do something silently here.
I think that's exactly what he's going to do. He's going to make small moves to try to Littlefinger style, right? To bring other people onto his side. Like, say, let's start with the Sea Snake, because he has a dragon, the biggest dragon right now, if I understand correctly. And now, if he could get the Navy on his side, you have to figure there's a lot of these lords, people on the council, people who matter that don't like the idea of a queen. So he's in business, right? So I think he's going to gradually start recruiting people more or less like old school Game of Thrones style, when you had kind of the War of the Three Kings and everyone's trying to get everyone on their side. I think we're going to get some of that, a little bit of recruitment stuff. And yeah, dude, like they're going to form some battle lines and there'll be dragons on the battle lines.
One thing is for sure, there'll be dragons, and we will be drunk on dragons all season long for you. It's fair to say that we're far from the only show to be talking about House of the Dragon. We know that. We know that you have other options. So it means a lot that you've checked out our little show here, Drunk on Dragons. Hopefully, you got drunk with us while on Dragons. We'll be here all season. We're going to break down every episode of House of the Dragon with drinks, and you guessed it, more dragons. Thanks again for checking us out. Please remember to like and subscribe. Helps us out a ton. Mills, tell these fine people and dragon lovers abroad where they can find all of our content.
We don't have that dragon porn, despite what we said earlier in the episode. Minimal dragon porn. We are drunk on dragons. Find us on all major podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all your favorite ones. Just search for Drunk on Dragons. You can find our YouTube channel at joeblowfootballshow.com. Please like, subscribe, follow, and if you could, drop us in your comment your favorite random theory for the rest of the season, because that's the best part of Game of Thrones, of House of the Dragon, is the speculation, all that fun stuff. Find us on social media at Drunk on Dragons. Find the Joe Blow Football Show on social media at Joe Blow Show. Thank you very much for checking us out. Please remember again, I don't want to, insist, but the YouTube channel, there's a bunch of good stuff there. You like Always Sunny in Philadelphia? Do you like Better Call Saul? Do you like Barry, Ozark, Peaky Blinders, football, drinking? There's stuff for you there. Please check it out. Really appreciate it. Doesn't cost you nothing, and I think it will be worth your time.
Don't you worry, because we'll see you soon with our coverage of episode 2 of House of the Dragon, titled The Rogue Prince, which will drop Tuesday, August 29th. We'll see you then, and until, stay drunk on dragons, my friends.
Thank you, Drunk on Dragons. You don't have to drink, but if you're going to drink, might as well be a dragon, right?
You ever been drunk on dragons?
Thanks again for checking us out. Drunk on Dragons is an unofficial show. We are not in any way affiliated with House of the Dragon, Game of Thrones, George R.R. Martin, HBO, or Warner Brothers Television. The views expressed here are those of the hosts only and do not reflect the views of any other persons or entities. You can contact us at drunkondragonspod@gmail.com. Please remember to like and subscribe. We'll check you out again next time for more drinking and, of course, more dragons.
She's your queen to be, a queen to be forever. desire.